Okay, yesterday, if you remember, there was a little part over here that I didn't know how to translate properly. So I read it over, and here it goes. Here it goes. So what's the Rebbe trying to say? The Rebbe is trying to say, in the year when the Rebbe was speaking, the first day of the 3 weeks fell on Shabbat, Yud Zayin Tammuz. And the last day of the 3 weeks, which is Tisha B'Av, also fell on Shabbat. Now, for those of you who don't know, the 3 weeks are the 3 weeks of mourning that we Jewish people observe, commemorating the destruction of the first and the second temples. And both of them started, some people say that the first temple started a different date, but for our purposes, both of them started on the 17th day of Tammuz, and 3 weeks later were destroyed, at least the date, 3 days. 3 weeks later, they were destroyed on the 9th day of Tammuz, both of them. And these 3 weeks, we sort of celebrate, sadness, and so that we don't make weddings in those days, and there's no music, and etc. Because we're trying to remind ourselves of the destruction of the temple. But more exactly, we're trying to remind ourselves that the reason the temple is not rebuilt, which it's supposed to be rebuilt, we're just stuck in the past. The reason that it's not rebuilt is because we're basically repeating, at least on some level, the reason that it was destroyed. And the reason that it was destroyed, says the first temple was because of idolatry, whatever, and the second temple was because of hatred. Hatred. Jews couldn't see any good, any redeeming factor in other Jews. So there was hatred between them, and etc. And it ended up that there were wars between them and murder. Okay, I mean, which is pretty, that's pretty evident nowadays. This is, but when Shabbat falls on the first day and on the last day, so it takes away the power a little bit. At least it shows that there's hope. It takes away the power of this of destruction and selfishness and things, all these things that caused the destruction of the first and second temples. So it takes it away. So that's what he said. So he says, here, let's go. So that's what he says. Basically, these 3 weeks are like the desert in the world. Desert is a place where there is no life. And that's what these 3 weeks are, is signifying that without the Holy Temple, that basically the world is a place without life. And what is the cure for it? So the cure for it is Shabbat. Shabbat, what does it mean there's no life? No connection to God. God is the source of life. What is it? What's the cure for it? Shabbat. Shabbat is a day that's totally connected to God. That's Shabbat. That's the day. Only Jews have Shabbat, right? Only Jews have. The 10 Commandments were not, they were given for the Jews. They were given to the Jews, but for all mankind, but not all of it. Not all of it. A non-Jew is not commanded to keep Shabbat, for instance, or to honor his parents, or it's forbidden for him to desire things. It's bad. You should desire your parents, but it's not. Okay. So, Shabbat. Oh, so he explains like this. What is Shabbat? The Jewish people in the desert, they made 42 journeys. 42 journeys. So we got the number 42. It happens to be that the number 42 is 6 times 7 is 42, right? 6 times 7. Which is that is indicated by the 3 Shabbatot, which are in these 3 weeks. Now, every Shabbat has 2 levels to it. Every Shabbat. There's what's called the inside of Shabbat, the intention of Shabbat, the thoughts of Shabbat, and then there's the deed of Shabbat, refraining from doing action. So there's 2 Shabbat in every Shabbat. So it says, the 3 weeks of the Bein HaMetzorim in time are like a desert in place. Now these 3 weeks are like the desert of the year. Desert. It's a place where nobody. Umaktim refuah. So if Shabbat comes in the beginning, and so the 3 Shabbatot, this is like providing the cure before the disease. Shabbat is the cure, and the disease is the 3 weeks. So we're providing the cure before the disease. And now every Shabbat has 2 levels to it: inner Shabbat and outer Shabbat. So it comes out that there are 6 Shabbatot in these 3 weeks, right? 3 times 2. There's 2 Shabbatot in every Shabbat. And because this has an influence on all of the days of the week, 7 days of the week, and in each 7th day of the week shines all these 3 Shabbatot. So it comes out that every week is shining 42. Al Yadei Zeh, by means of this, it controls the desert of the 42 journeys in the desert. That's the 42 journeys in the desert, is subjugated by these 42 aspects of Shabbat, which are found in every week. 6, which are the 6 Shabbatot, 3 times 2. Each Shabbat has 2 levels in it, in each one of the 7 days of the week. Okay, so in other words, what's the Rebbe basically saying? Very nice, but he's saying there's hope. In other words, the way the world is now is not the way the world is supposed to be. The world seems to be a big desert now. It's in an exile. It's not going to remain that way. We have Shabbat cures the whole business. That's what the Rebbe is trying to say. Okay, that's what he said. Let's go. Where are we now? We did this. That's what we were lacking. So, okay, so then the Rebbe said that it says, the prophet says that these days of mourning, all the fast days are going to transform to be days of happiness and rejoicing. Happiness and rejoicing. And so the Rebbe said, on one hand, there's going to be big holidays. The fast days are going to transform to be rejoicing. On another place, on the other hand, it says that all of the holidays are going to be negated except for Purim. It says in the Megillah of Purim, Yomei Purim Elu lo ya'avru mitoch hayudim. The days of Purim will not stop among the Jews, implying that other holidays will stop, but Purim won't stop. It says, therefore, in the days of the Moshiach, all the holidays are going to be there. All the holidays, nothing in the Torah is going to be stopped. What does it mean when all the other holidays are going to be stopped? We won't feel the holiness of it because everything's going to be holy, right? It's like you give a poor person in the street, you give him $10,000, he's tremendously happy. If someone comes and says, you just got an inheritance of $10 million, so he doesn't feel the 10,000 isn't $10 million, 10 million, and also 10,000. He doesn't care about the 10,000. 10,000, it doesn't, he cares about it, but it doesn't move him like before. The same thing with the holidays, Passover, Shavuot, there'll be holidays, but we won't feel the richness of the holidays because we'll be so infinitely more rich by just the future redemption. It says, but that's talking about all the other holidays, not the holiday of Purim, because Purim, there was self-sacrifice, and that's something, there's nothing higher than. And there's also all these fast days that are going to be transformed into holidays. They'll even be higher than Purim. Huh? That's the Melech HaMashiach, that he's going to take the Jews out of all the exile. One second, let me just, it's really cold. Too good, too good. Okay. Okay, so now that the Rebbe is talking about this, let's relate this to the 2 Torah portions that we're learning now. We're learning Pinchas, and I'm sorry, that we're learning now. Now we're learning Balak, where Bilam gives all these prophecies about the Mashiach. And next week we're going to learn about Pinchas. Pinchas, that's Elijah. It says Elijah the prophet. His soul came from Pinchas. It says Pinchas' soul came into. Actually, it says it's really different. The soul of Elijah. Elijah. It says Pinchas hu Eliyahu. Pinchas is Elijah. Now Pinchas lived about 1,000 years, something like that, before Elijah did. 700 years, something like that. Elijah was in the middle of the first temple, and Pinchas was before the Jews even went into Israel. So that's, let's say, 800 years, something like that, 700 years. So the Pinchas was 7, but it says that the soul of Elijah the prophet is waiting up in heaven, and it comes down whenever a Jew really needs it for to self-sacrifice. So it says, next week's Torah portion is talking about Pinchas, that Pinchas is Elijah the prophet, who will announce the future redemption. And next week's Torah portion also talks about dividing up the land of Israel, which that's also a thing that Moshiach is going to do. And so next week's Torah portion really talks about Moshiach, but this week's Torah portion also talks about Moshiach. It's Bilam. So it says, well, the difference is that Bilam, he's talking about pure Moshiach. Not talking about so much what the Moshiach is going to do, what the Moshiach is. Pure Moshiach. And next week's Torah portion is talking about the things that Moshiach is going to do. He's going to divide up the land of Israel, and etc. So let me just pause. It's not working. Okay. Well, give me one moment. Somebody put the air conditioner on super cold, high, blasting, so it's a little bit too good. I feel like I'm in a meat refrigerator. Okay, according to this, now we can understand the blessing in this week's Torah portion, where it says that God took them out of Egypt. This is the from the prophecy of Bilam. God took them out of Egypt. El Motzio Mitzrayim. God took them out of Egypt, and God took him out of Egypt. And this is Bilam's prophecy, where Bilam prophesied of the two Mashiachs. One Mashiach was King David, and the other one is Mashiach ben David. Okay, like we said before, says God said that just like in the days of going out of Egypt, it's a prophecy of Micha. Says the days of going out of Egypt, I will show you miracles in Micha. Just like going out of Egypt, I will show you miracles. Shebazed, in this Mudgash, it's hinting at that the future redemption by means of the Mashiach will not be only Bigalal HaHechrech Lahotziat in Israel Mikol Golios. It'll not just be the idea of taking the Jews out of the bad and stopping all the bad things that are happening. That this will be like, for instance, when God took the Jews out of Egypt. But the main thing of the future redemption will be Hosafat Shlemut Nalit Yoter Miyayetzia Mimitzrayim, to add on more good to the Jewish people than is to increase the good that the Jewish people began increasing when they left Egypt. So we left Egypt 3,300 years ago. And since then, the Jewish people have been adding on more good. I mean, obviously, after 50 days, they received the Torah, right? So that's pretty good. But it wasn't enough. The Jewish people, after that sin with the golden calf, they didn't really internalize what was happening. So they've been adding on goodness since then. Ad la'ofen shel niflaot says in the future, when Mashiach will take us out of Egypt, out of the exile that we're in now, so it'll just, the emphasis won't be so much on getting rid of the bad. The emphasis will be on adding more good. Like what it says, what we're going to read like in 2 weeks, Elam Masa'eh, talking about the journeys of the Jewish people, that the Jewish people journeyed from when they left Egypt. That going out of Egypt was not just going out the first time, 3,300 years ago when they left Egypt. that they went from Ramses to Sukkot. It says that they left Egypt. Fine, that was the journey when they really got out of Egypt. But going out of Egypt is called Prati Masot. All of the details of all of the journeys that the Jewish people made Bamidbar Amim in the desert, until Yarden Yerecho, until Jordan, until Yarden Yerecho, until the Jordan River where Jericho is. They crossed over the Jordan River to Jericho. Shalom is this hints at the future redemption, which is going to be by means of the Moshiach. How does Jericho hint at Moshiach? Because the word for Jericho is Yerecho. Yerecho means to smell with your nose. The Morach Vadayim. That it says Moshiach will judge everyone from his smell. Now we see an interesting thing about smell, that if a person is unconscious, you call his name and it doesn't help. If you put smelling salts on it, it wakens up something in the essence of his soul. The same thing, Mashiach is going to wake up the essence of the Jewish soul. This is a chelik miyatzir. This is that the Mashiach is going to come any moment now, and he's going to wake up all the Jewish people. This is just an extension. It's a continuation of what we went out of Egypt back then. Shebazeh, this is stressed at the completion of the future redemption. It's going to be the future redemption on its own. An interesting thing now they have, there's some schools in America where they decided to put the 10 Commandments up. And this, which, if you ask me, that's a very good thing. I mean, it's an excellent thing because it shows that God exists and that God cares. God cares what we do, and that there's right and wrong according to God. Absolute right and wrong. The same God that says your eyes are above your nose and your nose is above your mouth. And that's just a fact of business. That's just a fact of nature, right? That same God says that you can't kill and you can't steal. It's just a fact of business. You can't change it. Okay, it has to be explained. What does it mean? I mean, if somebody comes to kill you, you're not allowed to kill him. Of course you are. Of course you are. Allowed to kill him. It has to be explained properly. Good. But nevertheless, there are absolute laws. Absolute. So it's a good thing that there's the 10 Commandments. But they left out the first of the 10 Commandments. They start the 10 Commandments, you shouldn't have any other gods except for me. And the first, that's not the first of the 10 Commandments. There is one opinion that actually says that that is. But in any case, it doesn't make any difference. Even if that is the first commandment, it says you shouldn't have any other gods except for me. Who is this me? So it explains it before, I am the God that took you out of Egypt. The God that giving the Torah is the same God that took the Jews out of Egypt. And in the fourth commandment, it says that God created the heavens and the earth, so God has created everything. So we're worshiping our creator that took the Jews out of Egypt. So the Rebbe says the idea of the Jews leaving Egypt is not just a one-time historical thing that you can take it or leave it. It's a detail that's not so important. It says it's an ongoing process that's going on right now, and it's going to, the finale is going to be amazing. God took us out of Egypt only in order that there should be the final going out of Egypt in the days of the Moshiach. And that's going to be not just going out of bad, but it's going to be revelation of good. The reason that all the non-Jews are going to drop all the religions is not because they see that we're stronger than they are, we're more powerful, and you better not mess around with us, you better do what we want. No, they'll realize that the God of the Jews is creating everybody. He's infinitely good. And people will feel this good. And they'll say, hey, that's nothing like, my religion. I don't feel that. My religion, right? I'm always uptight and guilty and worried and this. That's the whole idea of transforming these 3 weeks of mourning into 3 weeks of joy. Okay, everything we said before, we have a special edition in all the other years in this year, when Yud Zayin Tammuz falls on Shabbat. This year it doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't work this way, but it did work back there. And the lesson is a lesson. Okay, so we have the 17th day of Tammuz, which is a terrible day. That's the day when our enemies broke through the walls of the first and the second temples. There's one opinion that says in the first temple it was the 9th day of Tammuz. But in the Jerusalem Talmud, it says that it was also the 17th. There was just so much confusion that they missed. Whatever it is, on the 17th day of Tammuz, that's when our enemies, murderers, they burst through the holy walls of the temple, the outer walls of the temple, the 17th. So this year, the year that the Rebbe was speaking, that terrible day, it fell on Shabbat. And it also was, they were reading about Balak, which that's the Parsha of Balak, which talks about Moshiach. What's it mean to us? First of all, we have to know that, just like we explained before, that in the years when Yud Zayin Tammuz falls on Shabbat, it is stressed the good, which is in the 17th day of Tammuz. Good is the Gematria 17. Good is 9 and 6 and 2. Right? 9 and 6 is 2 is 17. So the 17th day of Tammuz is bad, but it's the numerical value of good. So what do we pay attention to? The bad things that happen or the gematria? So it says when Shabbat falls on that day, it stresses the good. So I mean, if it's possible to stress the good, then one time is enough. You know, we saw that there's a good aspect of this terrible exile that we're in. And in the 3 weeks, so therefore there's so that we can feel the good. We can feel the good, which is in the 17th day of Tammuz, and that good draws out through the whole 3 weeks of mourning. Shalom Nirgash Achorban, we won't feel the exile or the destruction of the temple as being anything other than a preparation for the future redemption. Mitzad Hadgashat Inyan Geula, because of the stress that we're stressing on the Shabbat, that it's only for the future redemption. Kain Ugam also in generations in the future. It's like there's people that wait in line, right, for operations. Operations. A guy has something wrong with his toe, with his whatever it is, and he waits in line. I'm sorry, sir, but you'll have to wait, a month, a year for the operation. Why? Operation is a bad thing. They cut into you. It's terrible. He says, yeah, but when you're stressing the good, the cure that's going to come from it, so therefore you're willing to go through the process. So the same thing is these 3 weeks. And when Shabbat comes in the beginning, and it did come in the beginning with the 30 years ago, and also since then it's happened. So we realize that there is something good there, that this is all a process. Because we're coming closer and closer to the future redemption. Then, when we feel the purpose of it, pochet v'holech hergish, then there becomes less and less the feeling of the destruction of the temple and the exile that we're in. And this adds on a feeling of a preparation for redemption. The good, the tov, which is in the 17th day of Tammuz and in the 3 weeks. Ubalashan, and the language, we're going to have to stop over here because we haven't got time. Ubalashan, and what happened? In the language of the Gemara, he explains the reason why it's called. So why are these days called fast days? And that they're going to become days of sason v'simcha, joy and happiness. Right? And the prophet says that the days of mourning are going to transform to happiness. Bizman sheyesh shalom, when there is peace, then there is joy and happiness. If there are decrees from the non-Jews, then there's fast. But if there are no decrees of the king, the ein shalom, ratzo mitanim, ratzo ein mitanim. If there is peace, then everybody's happy. If there happens to be decrees of the king, then we make a fast. But if there is the nations aren't making any decrees on us, but it happens to be that there's no peace between us, then it's not necessary that we're going to be happy. We can fast or not fast. In other words, when there is weakened the exile and there's no decrees from the king, then the fasting becomes weakened. And we come closer and closer to the days that there's going to be happiness and simcha. So we feel the redemption is coming, so the bad things go away. This is stressed especially in the novelty of our generation. In all of the generations before ours, from since the destruction of the temple, that in them comes the bad things from Tisha B'Av, that the temple was, right, the walls were broken into and the temple was destroyed. The month of Tammuz was always a bad month. Churban and Galus, destruction, exile. But now in our generation, it was revealed that the month of Tammuz, finally something good happened. What happened? The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe got out of prison. He got out of prison this is 1927, in the 12th and the 13th day of Tammuz. That on them, it was completed, it was completed on Shabbat, which was Yud Zayin Tammuz. So if so, we see that something good happened in Tammuz, namely that the previous Rebbe got out of prison. Like the Rebbe himself, Lo Oti, said, not only me was I redeemed on Yud Beit Tammuz, but all those people who love the Torah, or they just do the commandments, or they don't do Torah or commandments at all. They're just called Jews. They're proud that they're Jews. Says the Rebbe that every single Jew was affected by my going out of exile. The Rebbe. Okay, so we've talked about this a lot before. The whole world depends on the Jews. And the whole world depends on the Jews. The Jews all depend on the tzaddik of the generation. Tzaddik says Yesod Olam. Tzaddik. So there has to be one person in every generation, like a Moses, that changes the whole generation. The previous Rebbe said, in my generation, that's me. Why is it him? Why? There's other Jews that were doing Torah. And because the Rebbe, he made a war against communism. And communism conquered the minds of Jews, not just in Russia, the whole world, even to this day. And in fact, it was a murderous, deceptive movement that caused the death of millions and conquered the hearts of also millions. How can it be such a terrible thing and people believed in it? Because there was no one to tell them differently. No one was there to stand and give an alternative. What's the alternative? You know, capitalism is the alternative and America is the alternative. So he says the previous Rebbe said the alternative is God. Believing in God that gave the Torah, took the Jews out of Egypt. And because of that belief, so they put him into prison and they threatened him with death, and he paid no attention whatsoever to them. They beat him up, they tortured him. He had no effect whatsoever on his belief, showing that, in fact, the belief in God is stronger than anything. It's stronger than going to heaven or hell or threats or whatever. And basically, everyone in Russia, either they kept it quiet and they defied the government, could be there were, or they just gave in, or they left, they ran away. And the previous Rebbe did not run away, and he did not keep it quiet, and he defied to the end, didn't give in. And he said that it's not just a fight of one person against one government. It's the fight of Judaism against the whole lie of the world. And when he got out, so it made a good thing in the month of Tammuz, transformed the month of Tammuz. That's called, all of a sudden it became a month of redemption, a month of redemption. Ubafradim, especially because of this, was it started the whole idea of Yafutsu Minatecha Chutza. not just saving the Rebbe, but saving all of Judaism, spreading out Judaism to the Jews, arousing Jews, arousing non-religious Jews, arousing anti-religious Jews, arousing Jews that don't even know that they're Jewish, in a way that from it is spread out the wellsprings of Hasidut and Judaism and the Jewish soul, the essence of the Jewish soul, to the whole world in order to bring Moshiach, as we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. This is a little bit long, so I can't, Is that right? No, let's try it. Here we go. The explanation is that since by means of all the signs, the rabbis say that we are now in the generation of the heels, right at the Moshiach is supposed to come any instant. Our generation is the last generation of exile, and the first generation of the redemption. Therefore, also when it comes to time that, even when it comes to time that we remember the destruction of the temple, namely from the 17th day of Tammuz, but now we're stressing mainly not the destruction or how to fix up the bad things, but how to add on the good that is going to be in the future redemption. All of this adds on even more in our service of spreading out Judaism everywhere. Don't keep it to yourself. And especially what's called in this bottom part of the world, in America, where that's the opposite from where the Torah was given, opposite side of the world. And this is a result of Yud Beis V'Yud Gimel Tammuz. Eventually, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was evicted from Russia, and eventually he went to America. And that really started spreading out Judaism to the Jews in America. And he was there for 50 years. I mean, the Rebbe was only there in America for 20 years. But now the Rebbe is saying the previous Rebbe, he passed away in 1950. And now the Rebbe is speaking, this is in 1990. So it says this is 50 years, right? 50 years. The Rebbe came to America in 1940. And now the Rebbe is speaking in 1990. That's 50 years. This is 50 years from the beginning of when the Rebbe came to America, and he said the words, La'alter l'tshuva, la'alter l'geula. If the Jewish people just return to God, immediately there will be the redemption. If so, he testified that everything has already been finished. All we have to do is just shine up the buttons for the parade. And even more, that even the buttons have already been shined up. And all we have to do is just be prepared for the Moshiach to come. And to accept the face of the Moshiach, think a little bit less about ourselves and think more about Moshiach. Think a little bit less about the negative things and think only about the positive things. That is the end. That's going to be the end of this period that we're in. Then there's going to be revealed only pure good. Then certainly without any doubt or even a shade of a doubt that already the time of redemption has arrived. And all of the ends, the projected ends, have already finished. And even doing tshuva, says the Rebbe. It says the whole thing depends on tshuva. Enough Jews have already done tshuva. The critical mass of Jews have already returned to the Creator, including the Moshiach. He's going to come to make the Jews do tshuva, and he's going to make even the tzaddikim do tshuva. This comes from the spark of godliness which is in every single Jew. Every single Jew is a tzaddik. So Mashiach is going to make them do tshuva also, everyone. Hari Kivin, since we're already found at the end of all of the exile is behind us, and we're just at the very edge of the future redemption. So therefore, our feeling and our stress should be more and more that the beginning of these 3 weeks is Yud Zayin Tammuz is good. We have to fast, we have to do everything, but the fasting is done because that's what the custom is. That by means of this, we come to the highness of the future redemption in a complete way, as we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. That's